A cold person, on the other hand, is a person who's avoiding you, a person who's standing away, a person who's kind of resisting, a person who's kind of blocked themselves off. We tend to think in those terms, that cold and hot refer to that kind of thing. And it's got a lot of play in Christian circles. It's got a lot of pastors. It's got a lot of books. It's got a lot of this kind of stuff. And they will tell you all kinds of things about how bad it is to be a lukewarm Christian. That, you could be an atheist, or you could be an on-fire believer, but the worst thing to be is a person who's just across the line into being a believer. They've just crossed the line, and yet there's nothing really to show for it. There's no real fruit for it. They just adopted a C+ mentality. That means I'm just doing enough to get by. Just enough so I can play in Friday's game, but I'm only doing that much. Maintain the 2.534 2.10 GPA, whatever. Sometimes we Christians get that mentality where it just basically says, hey, I got my fire insurance, I'm not going to hell. I've actually heard people come up to me and they'll ask me this question. It's not a bad question, but they ask the question, can a person ever lose their salvation? And I always answer that question the same way. Why do you want to know? Because there's some people who want me to say, no, you can never lose your salvation. So they can say, scot-free. Now, no matter what I do, I can't lose my salvation. There's some people who ask that question because they're afraid of someone else. I have a loved one who used to believe in Jesus. They asked Jesus into their heart, but now they're not living that way. Can a person lose their salvation? It's an important question. It's something that I like to answer, particularly for those Christians who are asking it out of a sense of fear or guilt. And I can tell you the answer right now. When Jesus grabs hold of you, neither one of you will ever let go. That's it. When Jesus grabs hold of you, neither you nor he will ever let go. You can take it to the bank. Why would you ever want to let go if you found the best thing in the world? Now, here's the deal, though. Even though there's some C+ Christians out there, this is not a passage that's talking about that. You see, lukewarm Christianity does not refer to someone who's just across the line. I myself have fallen into that same kind of temptation before, of trying to accuse people of, hey, you're not on fire. You're only spending 5 hours a week doing church stuff. That's not good enough. You're lukewarm. I've fallen into that mentality before. I think a lot of Christians have, especially the kinds of Christians like me who get ourselves overly involved in church stuff and then kind of look at other people who aren't overly involved in church stuff and have a tendency to think, what are you doing? When we all know the truth, church isn't the end of life. It's not about religion, it's about a relationship, so let's get beyond that whole, how much are you doing for the church kind of thing. I could stand on that soapbox for a while, but I got to move on because we're running out of time. We're basically out of time already, so anyway. The thing that is, there's another option. In order for me to explain that option, I have to teach you something about Laodicea. This will be quick. Here's some facts about Laodicea. 4 things you need to know. Number 1, they had bred sheep to produce a glossy black wool. I have never seen glossy wool. Never in my life. You know why? Because we don't know how to do it. Somehow Laodicea figured out how to do it, but we don't know how they did it. To this day, we don't know if they dyed it black or if they bred the sheep or if they crossbred the sheep or what. But they had this kind of wool that was glossy and black, and it was so amazing, so wonderful, that people all over the ancient area of Asia, what we would call Turkey, all over that area, flocked to Laodicea to buy their black wool. And they got so rich, number 2, they were so rich, they cashed government checks. The banking industry in Laodicea had so much wealth, they were like a privately run Fort Knox. When Caesar got a check from somewhere else in the empire or from some foreign nation or something, and he needed an advance on his check, he went to Laodicea to get money from them. This area, this city, had so much wealth, they didn't know what to do with it. They were overflowing with wealth. In fact, when the whole entire region was destroyed in 60 AD by an earthquake, there was a massive earthquake that came in and absolutely demolished the entire region of Phrygia. And Laodicea was one of those cities, in that region. And when that earthquake demolished the city, The government said, would you like help? And Laodicea said, no, we don't need it. They took great pride in the fact that they were able to rebuild their city from scratch with their own cash. They never needed any government aid. In fact, they loaned money to the government. Number 3, they had a medical school with a miracle cure for eye conditions. It was called Phrygian powder. They shipped it all over the empire, and it was supposed to be some miraculous cure for eye problems. I don't even know what type of eye problems, but it worked, I guess. And then number 4, they had terrible water. Go ahead and put the next slide up. I want to show you a map of where Laodicea is in relation to Colossae and Hierapolis. Hierapolis was a city to the north. Colossae was a city to the east. And many of you know Colossae because Paul sent a letter there. It's called the letter to the Colossians. We still can read it today. Laodicea is on the left-hand side, more to the west of them. Hierapolis and Laodicea were on plateaus, and in between them was this valley called the Lycus River Valley. Colossae was at the head of the river. Go ahead and click it there, Jonathan. Colossae was at the head of the river, and cool, fresh waters would flow into the valley, into the Lycus River Valley. But as the cool, fresh waters would flow in from Colossae, Hierapolis was known for having hot springs. And those waters would flow down into the same valley. There was a cliff. And from Laodicea, you could look out northwards and see a cliff 10 miles in the distance, where it was white limestone, and this hot springs water was just flowing over the top of this cliff down into the Lycus River Valley. So by the time you get to the Lycus River Valley, the cool waters of Colossae and the hot waters of Hierapolis merged into this lukewarm, nasty soup mixture, and anyone who was dumb enough to drink from the river Lycus would instantaneously spit it out. It was hideous. It was disgusting. Now, people would go to the hot springs and they would drink from there, because the hot springs were known to have sort of healing medicinal properties. People would travel all over the ancient world to get to Hierapolis so they could drink out of these hot springs. And they could bathe in the hot springs. It was soothing, and it was healing, and it was restorative. And then some people would go to Colossae because Colossae was widely known for having this cool, fresh water. And they would get refreshed by it, but no one ever went to Laodicea to get their water. Their water, they had no natural source of water. They had to pipe it in the 3 miles from the Lycus River Valley. And so by the time it got to Laodicea, after having been piped through these stone, 3-foot diameter pipes, after it had gotten to Laodicea, it was even more tepid and nasty than ever. A city with so much money couldn't even buy water. When Jesus uses the word lukewarm,